you have a clicker? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mark. You should have just skipped that, but I appreciate it. And this day is a day I've been looking forward to for a long time, since I knew it was going to happen. There's many friends in the room. I see my colleague Jane Nelson from Ketty School, who's been very close to us and a pioneer and a leader in this field. The team from FSG, an organization that is very proud of, that Mark did most of the work, but I'm happy to be a co-founder. And what's very, very exciting is looking around the room and seeing all the people that are here. I can't help but recognize Erica Karp. Erica has helped us pull together the major investors in the world to talk about how investors need to think differently about the company opportunity in addressing social issues. And what a force to be able to do that. I mean, and this is not the socially responsible investors. This is the real investors. You know, the BlackRocks. You know, the folks that grind up companies and spit them out if they don't perform. I see some of you in this room who have actually lived and made shared value thinking come to life. And over the course of this day, I hope we're going to hear more and more about that. So what I'd like to do this morning is we have a group of people in the room that we're very diverse in the sense that some of you are really the early people that we've known for years in working on this topic of shared value. And I put Nestle kind of on the top of that list. In fact, it was Nestle's poking and prodding, Peter Brabeck in particular, that actually led to this article, Creating Shared Value, being written. Because in the earlier work that Mark and I had done, they identified this kind of idea and said, gee, you should write more about it. So Janet is here from Nestle, and so I see companies like Nestle that have been involved in this in the beginning. But we also have a lot of people here who are kind of coming to this discussion, really maybe not for the first time, but this is one of your early opportunities to be part of this discussion. And so what I'd like to do in just a few minutes, I'm shooting for about 25 minutes or so, is see if I can give you at least the way I would describe the essence of what we're talking about here. Because I think we're still having a lot of discussion and debate about what is shared value. What do we really mean? Those of you in companies are going to find that a lot of your leadership team is kind of wondering, where this fits and what it really is. We have a lot of people who still say, gee, there's nothing new here. Which, by the way, happens in every generation of academic thinking. The first reaction is, there's nothing new here. I remember when I put out the 5 forces, oh, there's nothing new here. But ultimately, once you understand it, what you understand is what is the contribution, what is new. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the core idea. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about what some of the big, major opportunities that have emerged as we've understood this idea better, which I think will set up a lot of the discussion that we are going to have today. Where we are now with this work, I think, is not proof of concept. I think we now have hundreds, thousands of examples of creating shared value across every imaginable field, every imaginable sector, every imaginable function of business. That's not the issue now. I think the issue now is how we actually kind of accelerate the application of this idea in companies. And that involves tools issues, that involves organizational issues, that involves a whole set of issues in terms of new kinds of partnerships. So what we're really focusing on now is how do we put this idea into practice? And I'll like to talk about that a little bit as well. But before I do that, I want to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page in terms of what is this? What are we talking about? And then I think the day will hopefully unfold in a very powerful way. And then, once I talk a little bit, Mark and I are going to come up and we're going to have a little bit of an opportunity to have a discussion session about really the basic framing and the basic concept itself. And so I want you to, as you're thinking, I want you to have your toughest question in mind. Because if we in this room can't talk and understand clearly what we mean here, and if we can't kind of explain it to others, then ultimately we'll not be nearly as successful as we need to be in kind of putting this into practice. So what is the basic idea here? Well, I think that the kind of premises and that have led to this work, at least for me, go something like this. I think what we all, I hope, in this room understand is that there's only one institution in society that can create wealth. Only one, and that's business. Government can't create wealth. Government can harvest wealth, redistribute it, use that to make investments in social, in public goods and things like that, but government can't create wealth. NGOs can't create wealth as NGOs. NGOs can take resources and hopefully use those resources to solve important social challenges through various programs and other initiatives, but ultimately they depend on funding to do that. They can't create wealth. Only business can create wealth. Business creates wealth through a magical process of making a profit. That's how all wealth in society is created. Some business comes up with an idea for a product or a service that somebody needs and is willing to pay for. Business figures out a way to deliver that product or services for less than the cost of selling it, for less than the cost of producing it. And it's that act of making a profit that is magic. That's how wealth is created. Out of nothing, this process leads to wealth. And if that wealth is created, then all the jobs that are necessary are permanent jobs or sustainable jobs. If that wealth is created, then it can be scaled to anybody who needs that product or service can have it. That we all understand, I think, hopefully we all understand that only business can create wealth. And something I'm going to say several times today, and you're going to hear again, is we can't be embarrassed about that. That's the magic that makes societies prosperous. It's that process. So we understand that business creates wealth. We also understand, I think those of us in business, that a healthy business that's going to create wealth and sustain that wealth creation over time requires a healthy community in which to operate. If we have communities that are failing, if we have people that are that have problems, if we have poverty, if we have inequality, if we have an unhealthy community, ultimately business is constrained, deeply affected and constrained in the ability to create wealth. I think at some very broad level, we accept that. That said, we are in a period of history where I think there is an incredible awareness of societal challenges all around us. And the thing that marks this period of history for me, at least over my professional lifetime and even my kind of chronological lifetime, is the amazing perception of these problems, the awareness of these problems. The awareness of societal problems today is greater than ever any time that I can remember. And we know these problems are everywhere. They're problems of water, they're problems of nutrition, they're problems of health, they're problems of the environment, they're problems of poverty, they're problems of inequality, discrimination. There's all kinds of societal problems in this world. We're very aware of those problems. So business is taking place in this era where we have this incredible awareness. And by the way, the awareness is not just of folks that are in NGOs. The awareness is very high among our own employees, especially our younger employees, who have grown up with a very different perspective about the world than previous generations did. I think we're starting to understand that government and NGOs, although they're doing amazing work with growing sophistication, simply lack the resources to actually tackle all these problems. I think we're starting to understand that. And that leads you naturally to business as a major kind of focal point of thinking about what do we do to go forward in society. But the problem right now we have in business is that businesses, we in business, are often perceived to be not solving those problems. In fact, in many cases, we're perceived to be causing many of those problems. Okay? So remember, so look at the gap. Only business can create prosperity. But where we are today is, I think, we in business are being perceived as not essentially playing that fundamental role that we have in society, but indeed maybe prospering at the expense of the community. And this has been particularly true in the United States over the last 2 or 3 years, where corporate profits are very high. But lots of people don't have jobs, and there's all this hardship going on, and this disconnect between the success of business and the success of society and the communities. This disconnect, I think, is the profound challenge that we have right now. The irony, of course, is most all of you are doing more and more and more and more to try to address the community. And that activity of business to address community issues and be a good citizen and be responsible and provide resources, that activity has been going up steadily, but yet the legitimacy of business continues to fall. So that's kind of the situation we're in. And I would also tell you that young people today, the best people that you would love to hire are not necessarily drawn to working in business. The number one most popular job at Princeton University, where I happen to be a trustee right now, is, guess what? The most competitive job, Teach for America, by far, okay? And that gets to another issue of sense of purpose. I think company after company today is struggling with the question of what's our purpose. And, over the last 10 or 20 years, we had a glib answer to that question: maximizing shareholder value. And that answer doesn't cut it anymore. I don't know very many of the best and the brightest that want to spend their life doing that right now. Maybe we'll come back to that. Maybe we'll go back to white shoes and bow ties, and maybe we'll go back to that. Maybe this is just a grand cycle. But right now, I think we have this issue of purpose, and I think that issue of purpose has a lot to do with this issue of the awareness of all the challenges we face in society, and the fact that a lot of people, have needs and aren't doing so well. So this is, in a sense, the kind of deep fundamental position in which we find business today. And I will tell you that it's not just kind of public opinion and public awareness. It's now started to bleed into politics. Because of this deep concern about business, because of this sense in so many people that business is prospering really not with the community, but all at the expense of the community, we're finding that it's harder and harder to do pro-business public policy. It's harder to get those things done because supporting business is seen as a questionable activity in many circles. This is the situation we're in. And the question is, what does this mean for a company? What does this mean for business? What does this mean for us in our organizations? And of course, we've noticed this. All of you have noticed this. This is nothing new to you. And we in business have been trying. We've been trying really hard, in many cases, to sort of start to address these issues and start to create an effective response to this set of circumstances. And we've been doing that over a period of time. And so really the context for the concept of shared value is kind of where we've been. Business has been trying to address these issues in society. And we've been through kind of a learning process. And this learning process really started with philanthropy. The first response in business to these societal issues was philanthropy. You all, most of you in this room probably don't remember this, but if you go back 20 years or so, it was what percentage of your profits do you give? That was kind of the issue. And there was a company called Dayton Hudson that set the 5% rule. And they committed as a company to give 5% of their pre-tax profits to, social causes. And in those days, it was how much do you give? That was the way in which business was going to give back and address these issues. Okay? And right now, they're in the process of passing a law in India, which is basically that same law. It says that it's not a requirement yet. It's just a strong recommendation that business in India give a certain percent of their profits. I think it's 2%. And if they don't, they have to say why they're not. So the first way of thinking about this and the first way of dealing with this in business was philanthropy. Philanthropy is good. Many of you are doing it. We have lots of corporate foundations. It was the place to start. But ultimately in business, over time, we learned that philanthropy wasn't enough. Philanthropy wasn't enough. And really the next phase was what we call, what most of us call corporate social responsibility. What was corporate social responsibility? It was more than just philanthropy. It included philanthropy, but it also involved, first of all, compliance, understanding and meeting standards, community standards of a variety of kinds, and those have proliferated over time in terms of what are standards that we should comply with and we should meet, and there are ethical standards and there are legal standards. And we've come to understand we got to do a better job of that, and we have, many of you have. There's a whole set of citizenship activities that many companies undertake to be a good corporate citizen, which involve a whole variety of activities, and many companies have moved towards sustainability. I put that in quotes because that word sustainability means a lot of different things. And it's a little bit hard to define sometimes. It's pretty clear in terms of environmental sustainability, but it's a little less clear when we talk more broadly about sustainability. And this broader sense of what responsibility meant, I think, has been good. We've learned a lot from that process. We've done a lot of good in that process. But ultimately, what Mark and I believe is that there's a next stage. And that next stage is creating shared value. Creating shared value is different than these previous stages. It's not a substitute for the previous stages. We're still going to need to do philanthropic activity, although we can do it in a more effective way in many cases. We're still going to have to comply and meet community standards and think in a way that we avoid harm. But shared value offers a kind of another opportunity, which is capitalism itself. And what makes shared value different is that these steps, philanthropy and corporate social responsibility, really were more about doing good, more about providing resources, more about taking resources from the business and deploying them to do other worthy social jobs. But creating shared value is fundamentally about capitalism itself. It says that the more we learn about societal issues, the more we learn about poverty, the more we learn about health, the more we learn about housing, the more we learn about all these social issues, the more we see expanding opportunities to actually use capitalism to address those societal issues. And of course, capitalism means a business model. So the shared value level is where involves a business model. As we address a societal issue through our business in a way that allows us to earn a profit. That's the fundamental distinction. Every one of you needs to have a portfolio here. Hopefully you're gonna do some philanthropy. Hopefully you're going to have a robust corporate social responsibility program. But the opportunity here is how far can we move our agenda into this third level? How much of what we do to address society can we move into the business model opportunity? Because if we can, the more we can get here, the more we can actually solve societal problems. Because if we can get capitalism working, it's scalable. If we can get capitalism working, it's sustainable. We can do it forever. We don't have to keep raising money. It raises its own money. If we can get capitalism working, we kind of leverage the most powerful assets that we have as businesses. So the shared value opportunity is, how can we get, for our business, in our industry, given our capabilities, how can we get as much of our activity addressed on societal issues kind of using this model? That's the kind of shared value opportunity. So shared value is about creating economic value by creating societal value. It's not taking economic value that you created running your business and then investing it in social issues. It's not that. Shared value is about creating economic value by tackling a social issue, whether it's environment or energy or health or nutrition or the need for affordable housing or the issues of rural poverty. That's what shared value is all about. It's not kind of sharing the value we already created. It's actually not about values. One of the interesting things about shared value as a concept is it doesn't depend on anybody's personal values. So if there's an important social problem and we can use a business model and we can advance that social problem and we can do that sustainably, then that's what we should do. Whereas so much of corporate responsibility efforts are having to do with people's individual perception of this is more important or that is more important. But shared value says if in our business, if we can find areas where we can actually move the needle, given the nature of our business and our capabilities and what we do, then those are the ones we should pursue. It's not a question of personal values. It's a question of targeting and focus and selecting the way we are going to compete. You know, creating shared value is not balancing shareholder interests. It's not like triple bottom line. A triple bottom line says, well, we have to balance environment versus profit versus, you know, our employees. Shared value is not about balance. It's about driving the business model. So we can simultaneously achieve the societal objective and a good economic objective. That's the basic idea. Now, you know, the reaction one often immediately has to this would be, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could do that? But I don't really believe it. Okay? But what we've come to understand in issue after issue is That's wrong. We can. We can. You know, pharmaceutical companies have struggled for many years with the problem that pharmaceuticals are expensive. And what they did to deal with that problem traditionally was they gave away drugs to poor people or discounted them. That's the social responsibility model. We take money that we make in our ordinary course of business, and then we kind of share it or redeploy it to people in need. The problem with that approach is there's just not enough money. As somebody said yesterday at a meeting some of you were in, you know, philanthropy is great, but it's a drop in the bucket. There's just not enough money to solve the problem that way. But what the pharmaceutical industry is now doing is they're realizing, wait a minute. You know, we served, with our traditional business model, we served maybe 500 million people that were rich. And we presuppose an existing healthcare delivery system. And so our whole approach to competing was based on selling to rich people with a well-established healthcare delivery system. But we missed, you know, 6 billion people that can pay something. And so what the industry is now focused on, finally, is how can we create shared value? How can we address the problems of lower income citizens, often in countries without well-established health systems, with a business model? And to do that, we have to reinvent our product a little bit. We have to reinvent the way we distribute it. We have to put much more energy into the health system development. But that pays back many, many times, as we've seen in examples like Novo Nordisk, who's built a gigantic insulin business in China that didn't exist before, that's highly profitable. That's driving their growth. We have many examples in the room like that. If we think of this as a sort of, we take our money and sort of donate, we run out of money. And however much we're donating, the people want more. It's not enough. But if we can reconceive of this problem as, how can we create a business model? You know, how can we create shared value? Then all of a sudden we can start to see the opportunity to really solve these problems. And what we've come to understand is in problem after problem after problem, shared value opportunities exist. The reason is that we often thought of a lot of societal issues as sort of externalities. We thought of societal issues as sort of somehow things that were outside the firm. There's a whole theory that said that for the environment is an externality. Therefore, no firm should care about the environment. It doesn't really affect the firm. And therefore, we have to have regulation to force the firm to care about the environment because it's an externality to the firm. You know, people with malaria in the country are an externality. That doesn't matter to the firm. Or people with HIV/AIDS, firms don't need to worry about that. So therefore, we have to have regulation to force the firm to pay attention and be a good citizen. And what we've learned is that thinking is deeply and fundamentally wrong. The environment isn't an externality of the firm in most respects. It's an internality. If you have poor environmental performance, you're wasting energy. It's highly expensive. You're moving goods around in your supply chain much more than you really need to. You're dumping resources into the landfill that could be reused and recycled, and you would be more efficient in the process. What we've learned is a lot of these things we thought were externalities to the firm are really internalities. Social cost in the society are business cost. We've learned that over and over and over again. And these needs, health, housing, nutrition, these needs are the biggest market opportunities on the face of the earth. we've done pretty good at serving the conventional needs of conventional customers. We've kind of saturated that. The real needs today, the needs that can ignite growth, are serving these very important societal needs of customers in all parts of the world. And so what we're finding, ironically, is that the most powerful opportunity for innovation and growth in business today is not around the kind of conventional economic issues. It's really around the societal issues. This is the biggest discontinuity in management thinking that we will see for the next 20 or 30 years. We know how to do the conventional supply chain. We know how to serve rich people in middle-income countries. We know how to provide the products and services that look like the ones we do today. We know how to do that. The real opportunity we have for innovation in business is actually to deal with all these societal issues. And guess what will happen? If we do that, we will have a sense of purpose. We will have a sense of purpose. We will do something useful in society. We've always done it in business, but we've kind of lost that sense that we have this opportunity because I think we've gotten sort of hemmed in. Business has been in a bubble. We haven't seen these opportunities. We haven't seen these customers that we didn't serve. We haven't seen ways of changing our products or our supply chains or our processes or our communities in order to allow ourselves to grow and be more productive. We've been in a bubble. We've had a very narrow view of how to maximize profit. And now we see the opportunity to open up that view. And in this room, this is happening as we speak. Becton Dickinson, the major growth that they've been doing in the last 10 or 20 years comes from shared value. That's what they'll tell you. And for many of you, I think this is going to be your biggest market opportunity. So how do we really think about creating shared value? Well, as the article covers, and hopefully everybody is familiar with this, we believe the way of thinking about the shared value opportunity needs to be really broken down into 3 levels. Level number 1 is the product and the customer. Well, the question is, how do we think about our product, not the way we've thought about it in the past, but how do we think about our product in terms of how it touches societal needs? If you're a food company, what's the societal need you touch? Well, of course, nutrition and health. If you're a financial services organization, what's the societal needs you touch? Well, it depends on what segment you're in, but it probably has something to do with savings, financial sustainability. Every business has a product or service, and those services and products often can be reconceived to address important societal needs that we've missed. And similarly, we've often, in business after business, we find, look too narrowly at who the customer is or who the potential customer is. We've not recognized that there's lots of customers out there that we're actually not really serving because we've looked at the conventional customer that we could reach in the conventional way. And particularly as we become more global and we can serve emerging markets both within advanced countries and emerging markets in other countries, we started to see that there are many more customers out there that we can serve. I mean, I was in Peru a couple weeks ago, and almost every company in Peru has an operation in Lima, because that's the traditional capital. That's where the higher income people live, and everybody operates in Lima. But now the leading Peruvian companies are understanding, gosh, we have this giant country out there. And what if we figure out how to serve the outlying regions? Our market goes up dramatically. So we have many, many opportunities to change our products, to reconceive of our customer, and that's what shared value is all about. It's seeing our product not in its conventional form, but seeing it as an opportunity to meet an important societal need. and meeting the needs of customers who have not been served. There's a second set of opportunities having to do with our value chain and how we kind of configure the way we purchase, the way we produce, the way we accumulate supply, the way we handle logistics, the way we work collaboratively, work with our employees, the way we get our products to the market, the way we conceive of distribution systems. And for virtually every single company, there are major shared value opportunities here. You know, we at Harvard Business School, what we teach in supply chain management is obsolete. It's not about material usage. It's not about logistics minimization. It's not about you know, deep insight into energy efficiency. We're still teaching the same old you know, stuff. But there's a whole new way of thinking about how you operate a value chain, which is informed by an awareness of issues like retention of low-income employees and building their capabilities, around logistics, around resource utilization, around you know, where you locate stuff, how much you move stuff. And it's not just doing good. It's about driving economic value. But in doing so, we're also creating shared value. And then the third level of shared value, which is really the most advanced, if you will. This is kind of the highest order of Zen, or whatever the relevant analogy is the ability to understand that your company depends on an ecosystem. Suppliers, supporting institutions, training providers that are meeting the needs of the skill sets that you have to assimilate into your company. And the most advanced kind of shared value in most cases is the ability to kind of think that way about driving the business. And most businesses today think that their success is determined by what they do inside the company. And we're starting to understand that a lot of your success is also depending on what you encounter in your community and what you have access to in terms of other companies and other institutions, and that it, with some relatively you know, inexpensive activity, you can play a big role in that. This is a big theme of our Harvard Business School project on U.S. competitiveness, that, you know, the way to fix U.S. competitiveness is not to hope and pray that someday Washington will do something useful. The way to fix U.S. competitiveness is for businesses to fix it itself. You know, you can control the skill pool. You can control the quality of your supplier base. You can build the technological capability you know, in your region. You can do it, and so that's what we're talking about across the country now as we talk about this issue. Shared value comes in these three basic categories. Every company will have an opportunity here. Most companies will have an opportunity here, and then over time, we believe we'll learn more about how to do this well. And in the process, we will revolutionize how we do business. The opportunity here is to transform management practice. We don't understand how to do customer segmentation because we're looking at the same old customers with the same needs that we've been parsing, you know, for decades. You know, we don't know how to identify potential markets. We don't know how to think about energy in the value chain. We don't know how to think about resource utilization and logistics. There's a whole new opportunity to transform productivity. And it's not social stuff. It is. But at its core, it's a higher order way of thinking about business. And again, the irony is that the greatest opportunity for innovation in business is the awareness and recognition of all these social issues. How did we, you know, it's kind of, oh my God, you know, you wake up and you say, how do we miss this? But it's natural. It's natural given the history and historical evolution of management thinking and the professionalization of management that's been going on and the development of all these management tools and techniques, many of which left out this level of nuance and complexity and opportunity. And so the question is, how can we harness this power within our businesses and in the process create the most incredible energy and sense of purpose that you will ever encounter in your business career? That's our opportunity. And we've got to document and convince ourselves that these opportunities are real. We have to figure out how to do it in our particular business. CSR is sort of generic. There's a certain set of boxes that we all have to check. Shared value is company specific. So we have to figure it out for ourselves, and that raises the bar. That makes it more challenging. We have to provide the tools and the concepts and the examples to help us all do that, and we will. It's happening. It's real. That's why there are conferences going on all over the world on this topic. Okay. All successful strategies over the next 5 or 10 or 20 years are going to have a societal dimension. If your strategy doesn't have a societal dimension, wake up. Because it's those societal dimensions that, first of all, are going to help you unleash these opportunities for innovation and growth and serving new markets. But they are also going to be much more nuanced and sustainable than your traditional cost and quality, stuff that we've been doing for the last 5 or 10 years. Think of Whole Foods. Now, here's a company where the core of their strategy has a societal dimension. And, the traditional grocery stores just, beat themselves up, discounting, selling commodities. But this societal dimension has given Whole Foods the space to differentiate and distinguish and create lots of complexity and nuance in terms of what its competitive advantages really are and how it serves customers in ways that many customers really need. Every great strategy, I think, going forward is going to need to have a societal dimension, not because you want to do it for reputation reasons. See, there's another trap. This is not about reputation. It's about impact. It's about what you do. And when you build these issues into your strategy, you do a lot. You make impact. And that's the way that reputation arises, from what you do and the impact you achieve, not from all these wonderful things you say you're doing or you are doing that are disconnected from the fundamental core role of the company. And of course, if we can build organizations that are imbued with this concept of shared value, that pursue this relentlessly and over time, we will create purpose for business. And 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, people will want to work in business because they'll understand that that's the institution in society that has the greatest opportunity to make real change in society. That seems shocking, doesn't it? But it's true. And I think those of you here in NGOs are going to have a profoundly important role in this transformation. I think first to teach business about shared value, but ultimately to partner and engage very deeply with business in creating shared value. And we're seeing wonderful opportunities and examples of that all across the world. The leverage that an NGO can create if it can work collaboratively with a major corporation or even a not so major corporation around whatever issue, whether it's water or nutrition or whatever, is enormous. And of course, it'll be self-sustaining and scalable. And government is going to have to hopefully understand the power of shared value in achieving public objectives, again, in a collaborative way with business. If we can make this transformation, I think we can be optimistic about the future. Rather than, I think, the way many people feel today is, oh my God, there's not enough jobs, there's not enough resources, there's so many problems. What are we going to do? You know, our planet is screwed. You know, what are we going to do? I think what we have to do is we have to get the power of business unleashed in the right way, with the right philosophy, with the right framework, and really fundamentally capitalizing on innovation. And a lot of social entrepreneurs today are way ahead of us in this kind of thinking. And so we better go out and find them and learn from them. Because some of those business models that are going to transform our companies, you know, may be created by somebody else that really didn't start out to have a business, but they figured out that if they create a business model, then they could really solve something. Okay? That's the basic idea. Now, I just want to highlight for a few minutes that this whole line of thinking is starting to now to have some fairly major impacts on how business is done going forward. So let's just tick off a few of those. So hopefully, the number one thing that you should all take away here is that the shared value thinking opens up a whole new opportunity set. A whole new set of things you can do to drive productivity and drive profitability and drive growth in the business. And that's exciting. That's exhilarating. And the challenge is to figure out what those opportunities are in your particular company, in your particular industry, in your particular locations of operation. We will see a lot of disruptive innovations. We'll see a lot of new ways of doing things. And fundamentally, this is about business and management thinking and an advance in that thinking. So we've really covered this pretty well. What we're seeing today is something absolutely fascinating in terms of how companies are starting to learn to think about themselves in a different way. And this has to do with strategy. I mean, you know, a company like Nestle doesn't think of themselves as a food company anymore. They think of themselves as a nutrition company. This is a very basic, fundamental change in how the company defines itself and what its business really is. You know, Nike, you know, no longer sees itself as a shoe company. It's kind of reconceived what it does in a broader societal context around important societal needs that its customers have. You know, IBM, Zipcar, these are examples. I'm on the board of Thermo Fisher Scientific, or I actually was until recently, where I finally was able to retire from that board. Boards are really tedious these days, I'll tell you. You know, Thermo Fisher used to think of themselves as a leading, you know, scientific instruments and laboratory services company. And now they say, what we are is a company that helps our customers be healthier, cleaner, and safer. Okay? So I think there's an opportunity for true transformation in how we think about ourselves as companies. And in thinking of ourselves that way, we open up whole new opportunities and position ourselves very differently. And create a sense of purpose. I think you should ask yourself, does your mission statement, does your strategy statement embody a sense of purpose somehow? Can you see a purpose there that somebody would rather come to work for you than go to Teach for America? And if you haven't gotten there yet, you'll get there. But this is the order of transformation. I've frankly never seen anything like this in business. These sort of breakthrough transformations in the whole conception of organization has of itself. And these things are, all of you are going to do this. It's a question of how soon. Okay? That's what shared value opens up. We're starting to understand that the stakeholders here in society are now starting to reconceive of their roles in very powerful ways. So we're no longer just donating to charitable causes and ticking off boxes in our social responsibility reports. We're going to keep doing those things, but we got to do more. We're going to start driving shared value programs. Philanthropists, we're not going to just donate to charitable causes, because we understand that unless we can create a business model, unless we can engage the private sector and NGOs together to kind of find these kind of solutions that I've been talking about, then we ultimately won't be successful. NGOs, used to conceive of themselves as taking in grant money and then providing a social service. And too often the social service was a remedial service, an emergency service, dealing with the consequences of the problem, not the problem. And now we're increasingly understanding that the best NGOs are understanding our job is actually to invent and enable the implementation of kind of new shared value business models that will allow us to actually deal with these issues. And government, I think, in many ways has a long way to go as well. Government has thought that since social was inconsistent with economics, since profit was inconsistent with being good and worrying about social issues, since there was a trade-off between economic and social, government had to be the one that take the hammer and pound on our heads and say, you're required to be social. You're required to give, you're required to do this, you're required to do that. Rather than seeing that government's job is to create a platform and infrastructure and basic investments which will allow the shared value process to spool up and drive progress. So we have tremendous opportunities here in all sectors of society to think about our role and our role relative to other actors differently. Measurement. We've gotten into the habit of, we've long measured business results. We know how to do that pretty well. Some would say too well. And most of you have started measuring social indicators. But the shocking and ironic thing is that we never connect the two. So you'll have a company that proudly talks about how much energy they save, but they actually don't put the number down. Okay, how much do we really save? And how much do we really invest in those energy-saving initiatives? And how much do we get in terms of return? We're almost embarrassed in business to say that we're actually making money doing something that's good. Isn't that ironic? That we would be embarrassed to show that we're gaining substantial economic benefits from recycling or serving emerging markets. We've got to get away from that. And the way to get away from that is we need to start putting these things together. We need to start understanding the economic consequences of progress on societal metrics or societal needs, and how to link the two. And what we're finding in the companies we're working with here is when we start explicitly linking the social and the economic, when we start doing that rigorously, there's a lot of money on the table. We can do it better. We can be more efficient, more effective, and there are great examples of that. And there's a measurement session later this afternoon where we'll tell you about some of those examples. And some of the companies in this room have been incredibly open with us in terms of sharing their journey on measurement, and we'll talk about that this afternoon. We are in the early stages of starting to get investors to think differently about this whole set of issues. Investors traditionally have been skeptical of social responsibility. They've seen it as, okay, the social responsibility of a business is to maximize its profit. If you want to do good, pay out your profit, and your shareholder can be as good as they want with their own money. That's kind of been the prevailing view of many investors. There's been a group of investors that have worried about social responsibility and harm mitigation and risk mitigation and being sustainable. There's a field of investing now that's kind of grown up, but it's really more of a branch of investing. It's really more of an isolated sort of area of people that are true believers. But the mainstream investors is still very skeptical about this whole topic. But what's starting to happen, and I mentioned Erica at UBS, what's starting to happen now is slowly but surely investors are going to understand that the shared value stuff creates these new opportunity sets. And good investment analysis is going to start holding companies accountable for taking advantage of those opportunity sets. What's your energy efficiency program? What's your resource utilization in the value chain look like? What are those customers in your space that you're not serving and you're leaving on the table? This is what new investment analysis is going to be. Business schools have to catch up in terms of teaching managers about this stuff, but investors are going to catch up and figure out how to do investment analysis differently and better, recognizing these opportunities. So this is something that is going to take time. But as we learn more, as we have more examples, as we have better measurement, as we see this taking place and playing itself out in more and more industries, we're going to see a change here as well. And that leads to kind of what's our agenda with this group and at FSG and in this field. What's happening now is we're creating a new discipline of management. We did total quality, we did, there's been disciplines of management that have developed over the years, and I believe this is the next big, rich discipline of management, which is how to think about this set of issues. It's going to involve every function of business. We need new marketing concepts, new customer segmentation ideas, new ways of looking at geographies, new ways of thinking about the supply chain, new ways of thinking about employee and human resource practices. Virtually every function of management is going to be touched by this set of opportunities. And our job at FSG is, and my job, as a scholar, and Jane's and others who are working in this, is really to provide the ideas and the knowledge and the frameworks that kind of move this process along. And so what we've been doing at FSG is things like trying to understand how we measure this stuff. So we'll talk about that this afternoon. We're kind of taking deep dives in individual sectors like pharmaceuticals and medical devices and saying, what do we see going on in that sector? What are the kind of shared value opportunities that are present there? Who's on the frontier? Who's at best practice? Who's driving this? As Mark said earlier, we've been starting to look at particular countries, particular types of countries, lower income, middle income, higher income. What are the opportunities for shared value in those contexts? So this is the process that is going to play itself out over the coming multiple years, for sure. And the hope is that this second annual Shared Value Summit will turn into a whole array of activities that will take place throughout the year with increasing richness and increasing depth as we all kind of learn together, how to do this. That's our opportunity. I just want to say that I think I have some credentials in business. I know hundreds of CEOs. Work with many, many companies. This isn't sort of feel-good thinking. Not what this is. Don't for a minute think that that's what we're talking about here. We're talking here about something that in many ways is the most exciting opportunity that I think I've seen in my entire career, is to do this stuff. You wouldn't be here if you didn't at least think that there was some reason to believe this. But I can tell you that the folks back home are not all going to be there. Okay? So what we've got to do is we've got to learn how to be crisp and clear and rigorous. This is about business. This is about business. And so over the course of this day and over the course of the year, we want to work with all of you, because the more we work with you and the more you work with us and the more we learn and the more tools we have and the more examples and the more rigor, I think the more we'll be able to succeed at this quest, which I think, again, to me, is the single greatest opportunity we have in society these days to actually deal with a lot of these problems that we're facing. So with that, I always feel a little bit like a Baptist minister, and that's an unaccustomed role for me. But I also want to say that although it may sound like that, this is really about business. And so with that, let's open it up. Mark, come on up. Sure. You can lead the discussion. We'd like to give you a chance to ask questions, have reactions. Mark, would you want to make any opening reaction to what I said, or should we just open it up?
I thought you did pretty well.
Okay, thank you.
No, why don't we pull up a couple of
Okay.